Hello and welcome back to A Drunk History of Middle-earth. This is a show where we take the legendarium created by J.R.R. Tolkien and have a good, simple, wholesome chat about it. Sometimes it's a drunk person, me, trying to explain stories or events, and sometimes it's breaking down the stories and concepts as if we're talking to a drunk person. I'm Chris, I'm an avid Tolkien nerd, I'm still learning and realising how much I actually don't know. And joining me is your co-host and my lovely wife Rebecca. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, I'm Rebecca, a complete novice to all things Tolkien and nerdy in general, although now I've watched all 3 films, extended editions, and can now confirm that I have been converted to the religion headed by L. Ron Tubbard.
Long may he live. Right.
Sultan.
That's the intro sorted. Let's get into today's episode. Hello. Yeah, this is our second go at recording this one because we got about 3 minutes into it. Rebecca and I said some incriminating things, and you missed. Basically, dear listener, you've missed out on a very good conversation about what I thought were crack pipes and Becca thought were glass dildos, and they're actually just beauty implements. Face rollers, yeah. But then you could rub a dildo all over your face. Anyway, hello, welcome back. This episode today is going to be about Ents and Entwives, but before that, I just want to give a very quick update. So we've got a website now, which is linked in the show description. It really only links to the show. I mean, it's not anything crazy. You know, we don't monetize this or sell merchandise or anything. But what it's for is where the transcripts are going to be held for each episode, which I'm working on. So I've been using AI to transcribe the episodes for people who are like hard of hearing or...
Just to make it more accessible.
Yeah, just to make it more accessible, basically. However, Whisper AI is mint, right? I've used the AI tool to do it. However, I've still got to go through manually and say Chris, Rebecca, and it feels like really masturbatory sometimes because like I've only done 15 minutes of one episode, so it's a fucking long job, and I've wrote like they both laugh or Rebecca finds this amusing and stuff like in like because you got to do the closed captions as well. But anyway, yeah, links in the description for all our social medias and whatnot. I'm considering setting up a Twitter and a Facebook just to have a way for people to engage with us, because we've got a tiny little Discord server, and I get a few comments on Reddit and people talk to me. But we're getting to that point now where we're getting enough downloads and listeners that there's obviously people there, so I want to give them a way to engage with us. But yeah, just let me know. There's an email address in there as well if you've got any ideas about where you normally hang out and you'd like to talk to us. But yeah, Ents. What do you know about Ents? What's your Ent knowledge?
That they are tree people, but aren't like the trees in terms of like they look after the trees. They're there to, fight battles for the trees, look after the trees, kill some dwarves if they're trying to chop them down.
Yeah, that's literally
all I know.
No, that's pretty fair to be honest. Yeah, they're the big tree lads. Obviously we'll go into them. They're the most ancient race in Middle-earth that are still technically alive. Whether they're alive now in the 7th Age, if we were to say it was real, who knows. There's a bit of a difference between their tone in the movies versus their tone in the books. So in the movies they're like quite comedic. So it's like, tree? I am no tree. And when they're mistaken Merry and Pippin for orcs. Yeah. And it's played up for laughs when they take ages and like they come back and they say we've decided, and Merry's like, yeah, and he's like, you're not orcs.
Is that you just interpreting it that way though?
Well, I mean, I don't know, it's just in the movie they are quite comedic, right?
I mean, if you lived with someone who talks really slowly, that might not be funny. That might just be normal.
Well, it is for the Ents. Yeah, they think everyone else is really hasty. But in the books, it's more played up that just how tragic they are, because we keep coming back to this theme that Middle-earth is a world. It's a post-apocalyptic world in the 3rd Age, basically. Like all the best shit's been and gone.
And if you live for that long, actually the conversation would seem like it had gone pretty fast in terms of time.
Yeah, true. Well, they're deliberately slow in thought and action and contemplative. Have you seen that meme? I think I sent you it, where Pippin and Merry are going Merry, the tree is talking, and then it's Treebeard with an AK-47 and a rice hat speaking Vietnamese.
No.
But Ents. So, physical description. Ents are generally 14-foot tall creatures that resemble the trees they tend to. In the books, there is Ent called Quickbeam who guards rowan trees, and so he looks like a rowan tree. Treebeard guards oak trees. Beechbone, you can probably guess.
Yeah, beech.
Etc, etc.
Give me another question.
Treebeard lives in Fangorn Forest, right? What's his other name?
I don't know. The joke was that you were going to ask me another tree, like, I don't know, like elm beard, and I would say, oh, I know that one, elm, and I was finally going to get some questions right.
There's not a great many named Ents, to be honest.
Oh, gosh.
Soz.
That wasn't the point.
That was very confusing.
You were trying to big me up here.
It does. Do you know? It does bring us on to a good question. Though. Someone asked on Discord the other day if we'd ever do an exam episode of asking you questions about Middle Earth from what you've learned so far. Would you be up for that?
Yeah, but it would probably destroy my soul.
You gotta pay the troll toll. So Ents are immortal, but they can still die from axes or fires, etc. Merry and Pippin say, I can't remember which one it is, but in the Two Towers book, they put it really well. And they say that while they can die to axes, it would take many axemen to kill one Ent, because they'd swing once and never get a chance for another swing.
Yeah.
Like, Ents are fucking crazy powerful. And I'll come on to it, like, they're parallels. But Ents live in Ent houses that can be very complex dwellings, or they can just be very simple, where it's literally like a grove of trees with a stone table in the middle. But they all make use of the natural environment. Like, I think one of Treebeard's houses has like a waterfall as like a natural water curtain to separate rooms. And like a big flat stone as a table that Merry and Pippin are able to sleep on. But all the Ent houses have fresh sources of water that Ents use to make Ent draft. And I've been re-editing our like drunk watch episodes, and in the Two Towers one, which is the one I'm editing now, we talk about Ent wash, and you're just like disgusted.
Do we?
Yeah, we talk about Ent wash, because I think I called Ent draft Ent wash in that episode because I was drunk.
I can't even remember that conversation.
Yeah, but you're like, oh, that sounds disgusting. It sounds like Ent mouthwash.
I can't even remember it.
Well, not much is known about Ent drafts, except it's really nourishing. Obviously Merry and Pippin grow.
Do you think they like got like a bath of the water and they sit and like swilling it like a broth?
Yeah, it's like Gamer Girl bathwater.
Oh god.
Yeah. See, Treebeard was selling Gamer Girl bathwater before it was
Is that
cool.
a thing?
Yeah, so there is. I think it was someone called Belle Delphine. I don't know, because I'm not of that inclination where I watch things
Where
on
you'd
Twitch.
buy.
I don't watch these people, so like I hear about it secondhand. Like I watch YouTubers like the documentaries like Kira TV and like Moist Critical, and I watch people like that where they talk about these things. But I don't tend to watch things like Twitch, and I don't know e-celebs. She's a very enterprising young lady who sold her bathwater to a lot of very sad men, I can assume. But yeah, so maybe that's what Treebeard was doing. But it's hella nourishing, and it tastes like the trees of the Ent that makes the draft. So Treebeard's tasted earthy like oak trees, and beach bones would taste like a bit like beach. It would remind you of beech trees, and it made the hobbits taller when they drank it. Like, it's very nourishing, because it's the only source of nourishment for the Ents.
Yeah.
But it does sound like they've just pissed in it.
It's grossing me out.
It sounds like they've pissed in it, doesn't it?
It's making me feel a bit sick. Like, I'm just thinking of either bin juice or like, when you've done the dishes in the sink, the dishwater.
I worked at Pizza Hut when I was 16, right? And I used to do shifts in the kitchen, which I loved, apart from like one guy who I thought was an absolute cunt. I wanted to murder him. I used to dishwash, and I used to have to unclog the sink a lot because people wouldn't scrape the plates before they'd chuck them at me.
Oh.
And there was one time, right, I was plunging like fucking mad.
Oh no.
And I ripped the plunger out, and the water like glooped up and went in my mouth.
Oh.
Sadly, I didn't get any taller. Yeah, disgusting. But yeah, I would drink Ent draft. I would not touch sink water again. But going back to Ents, the danger Ents have with being incredibly long-lived is that they become incredibly tree-ish, and eventually they become indistinguishable from the trees that they tend. I can see you still looking disgusted.
I feel like I'm going to be sick. I actually feel like I'm going to wreck.
Well, it's okay. It's all about trees, so this is nice and earthy. Don't think about wet pizza going in my mouth that other people have eaten. But Ents, their language and thoughts are very slow. And so are their songs, and their songs are slow and deliberate. Like when they're going to war in Isengard, their songs are like boom, boom, crack, like crack and stone, to war, but like really slowly.
Do you think Tolkien couldn't sing, and that's why he puts a lot of music and songs in, because he appreciates.
He was a poet, like straight up. He was a poet.
Yeah, but
like,
that's not like having
I
being able to sing.
I don't know if he could sing because when he there's a recording I posted in our Discord, and it's easy to find. It's Tolkien reading Durin's.
He's very melodic, when he speaks.
He's reading Durin's song, but he does it a lot quicker than I'd expect. So like, as in,
he like raps it.
Oh, well, almost, but like, yeah. So I don't know if he could sing, but I don't know if he ever turned his mind to it. But if you are probably one of the greatest writers to have ever lived, in my opinion, with one of the most prolific fictional worlds, you got to draw the line somewhere. So I'm not going to criticise him for not being able to sing, just like I wouldn't criticise Einstein because he couldn't fucking play tennis or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of...
Why are you not a triple threat?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
in the arts.
You sound like an Asian tiger mom.
No, I'm not meaning like that. I was just stating a point. Could be.
Do you know what you're like? You're like that meme of like the Indian dad and son on a plane where they're like, someone's having a heart attack, and he's like, you could help if you were a doctor. Do you want to put your hand up? And he's like, Dad, I've got a PhD. And he goes, oh, do you want to put your hand up and say, I'm a musician who can help? You better not be like this with our daughter.
I'm sorry, I can't help it if I am perfect and skilled in many things.
Right.
I'm trying to give the illusion of like intelligence, because I feel like a lot of the listeners probably think I'm quite dumb at this point.
No, you are well liked. People tend to comment on our chemistry and your comments, because like you look at things in a way that a lot of us have either never looked at it that way or we've forgotten to look at it that way. So yeah, but that's we're not a one homogenous group. We're getting well off track. Shut the fuck up, please. Just kidding. Please keep talking. Their slowness and their deliberateness is why they think everyone else is so hasty, because they're so slow in thought. And speaking of their language, Ent is an Old English word that means giant. Its exact usage is unclear, but it's the best we've got. And normally, last week we talked about orcs, which have like a choose your own adventure worth of origin stories, right? Ents, in terms of Tolkien's, were just pretty sudden appearance in his mind when he was writing. So he was writing the chapter about Fangorn Forest when he said suddenly Treebeard appeared. But he also said that later he said he might... Do you know, like when we talked about the Dead Marshes ages ago, and that he probably got the inspiration from... He said himself, I probably was inspired by the trenches, by the craters at the Battle of the Somme. He said the same thing about Ents. He was like, I don't... like they just sprang into my mind, but probably might have come from the... like another place. And in this case, he said it might have come from his frustration with a part of the play Macbeth. Which, are you familiar with?
Yeah.
Well, I was writing this and I thought I'll ask Becca about it because I'm just researching it, but I don't know Macbeth very well. But Shakespeare is someone I always think I'd like to know more about, because I love that Romeo and Juliet film with Leonardo DiCaprio.
It's not quite the same.
Yeah, but, whatever. So, in Macbeth, there is a quote that is said, Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Are you aware of that part?
Do you know what? Every time we record, it's like a bloody exam. Right? I did Macbeth about 10 years ago. If I had, you told me previously, right, we're going to just have a little bit about Macbeth, just kind of rejig your memory.
Well, you're doing a degree in classics.
Yeah, but we're not studying Macbeth right now.
Oh, well, that's on you. I can't be expected to give my co-host any information about the upcoming episodes. That's just too much you require of me. Going back to that, what I could find out is that this was like a trick. Like, did the witches tell Macbeth? Did they give him like a prophecy or something? I'm sorry, any Shakespeare fans, I'm going to fuck this right up. So someone told Macbeth that, look, you'll be safe as long as the Great Burnham Wood doesn't come to your castle. And he was like, well, trees don't move. Wicked. But that was a wee trick, because Macduff's army cuts the trees down and uses them as cover to approach Macbeth's castle because it's protected by archers. And thus Macbeth realised he got fucked and fate is coming for him. Tolkien said when he was younger, he had like disgust and frustration at this part of the play, about the way it was used. So he said that's one possible reason.
He was like, why have to cut the trees down?
Yeah.
They exist as their own beings anyway.
Like I said, Shakespeare is not my strong suit. I'm all about fictional history, and Macbeth is a documentary. So I'm just going to leave that alone. But I've mentioned it, but the books, as usual, are a bit different because the Ents are presented more as sad and noble beings who are facing a slow decline like the rest of the world. So I read somewhere the other day that it's only really that Aragorn and Arwen's marriage was kind of like the last hope for humanity because it reinvigorated like the bloodline of kings and gave the dominion of men a chance. Because if the War of the Ring had been lost, even if Sauron won, the world would have just declined into nothingness. In terms of decline of the world, the Ents aren't an exception to this. They're the oldest race in Arda and they're dwindling, and they can't reproduce. They can't produce what's called entings. And the Ents were devoted to Oromir. So I was quite surprised at this. I thought because Yavanna had the Ents created, that all of them would be devoted to her. They're not. The Ents, the males, they're devoted to Oromir because Oromir loved the trees and the forests most of all, and that's where he'd go hunting normally. Do you know, like, so do you know when the sleep of Yavanna where nothing was growing, but he'd still visit Middle-earth?
Yeah.
That's where he'd go hunting. And the Entwives, we'll come on to in a second, were devoted to Yavanna because she loves all things that grow, and that's what the Entwives were about. Was growing. Ents only started to exist for Tolkien, like I said, when he came across Treebeard in the story. However, they were later... So this is weird because they were later included in earlier stories. So he was writing The Lord of the Rings about the third age, but all throughout his life he was revising things like the Beren Luthien, the Fall of Gondolin, etc. So there are first age stories where Ents appear. The most... I think maybe the only appearance, or the most famous one, is the Ents appear and help kill some dwarves who've killed an elven king in order to try and steal a Silmaril. But that is another story that will be dealt with at another time because I'm looking forward to that because it involves dwarves, and unfortunately I don't think dwarves come out as the good guys there. But that's the origin story of why dwarves and elves hate each other.
Right.
It's to do with the necklace Nauglamir and the elvish king who is a wanker. Called Thingol. So, you know, like, nobody's really good in that story, and they are just pure dicks. So we know from earlier episodes that the Ents came about because the Valar... What was she called?
Varda?
No, the other one.
Yavanna?
Yes! Who's she married to?
Oh, jeez. Owley.
Yeah. So yeah, the Ents came about because Yavanna was worried that her husband's creation was going to tear up the trees in Middle-earth. That was the issue. And she was so worried about it, she went to speak to Manwë, king of the Valar, who then spoke to Eru on her behalf, and Eru acquiesced to her request. And the Ents were created. Because of the way they were created and why they were created, they have a particular mistrust for dwarves as well as orcs, who, you know, they were both known to cut down trees for fuel en masse. Humans as well, I'd imagine, because the Númenóreans in the Second Age cut down most of the forests in the world, and so did Sauron, but that's like orcs, obviously. Elves, though, they absolutely love. And the reason they love elves is that elves taught them how to speak. They taught them language, and Treebeard says... Elves cured us of our dumbness, and they've never forgot that, and they fucking love elves.
Yeah, you can be intelligent and not be able to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Look at our dog. Well, that's true though. Like they are intelligent animals, aren't they? Like,
yeah.
But in the Two Towers, Treebeard loves it when Legolas tells him that he wants to go back to Fangorn with his friend, and Treebeard's like. Yeah, he's like, any friend of yours is an elf I'll be friends with. And Legolas says, well, actually, my friend is Gimli the dwarf. And Treebeard is not... He's really taken aback by that. Until Legolas says, well, Gimli's axe is just for orc necks. To which point, like, Treebeard's like, enemy of my enemy is my friend. He's like, oh, well, that's a story I'd love to hear. So, and then he's just like, sound with Gimli after that. And he very quickly gets over his misgivings, but... In general, because like that stone cold line from Owley at the end of the chapter in the Silmarillion is just, nevertheless, they'll still need wood, and carries on with his work.
Yeah.
Just fucking hell. But after the events of The Lord of the Rings, Gimli and Legolas do visit Fangorn Forest together before they then visit the glittering caves behind Helm's Deep, which I'd love to cover if I can find more information on it. So we know their origins. I came across one sentence in a book the other day, right? And we'll get onto it in a second, but it kind of like, I was just like, oh fuck, what are the implications here? But in letter 247, Tolkien says that the Ents were either souls or Maya that inhabited trees and became Ents, or they were Maya that just started to look like trees because of how much they loved them. I don't know which one I'd prefer, if I'm honest. I don't know whether I like the idea of a tree coming to life or the idea of...
No, I like the...
that they just started to look like them.
Yeah, like how you look like your dog.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, you do start to all like look like each other, don't you?
And this week's episode is sponsored by Tails.com. That's a joke.
I'm going to shave your head so you look like me.
Please don't.
So the book, The Nature of Middle-earth, has one single mention of Ents, right? It's on page 291, but it's a bit profound in what it says. And the basic point is that it's unclear whether the Maya that became Ents and Eagles were already within the universe when the Ents were created, or they were sent into the universe by Eru. Like, much, you know, like how Tulkas descended into Ea when he sees what Melkor was doing.
Yeah.
So he was still in the Timeless Halls until he saw what was happening. And I don't know, because if they were already there, for me it'd be like Eru doing his Blue Peter moment, and he's just like, well, you want? Oh, luckily, here's one I made earlier. You know, he's some spirits that are ready to be eagles and trees. But if they weren't there already and Eru sent them, that does show he cared for the universe in a more direct way, rather than just like, the plan will sort itself out. And like, he took corrective action.
Yeah.
You know, but when I read that, when I wrote that, I was thinking of Good Omens, which we've just written, which we just watched, and it's like, it's the great plan. Yes, but is it the ineffable plan? Well, it is written. Yes, but which plan? Are they the same? And you know, it just made me think of that. But Ents and Eagles were created around the same time as the elves, or they were created around the same time that the elves woke up, I should say. Before the elves taught them to speak, they were a much simpler people with very simple language. They, interestingly enough as well, Ents became stronger the older, like, as their time went on as a people, they got stronger. Not the same with elves, you know, who, like, the first age elves and the ones who first awoke were a lot stronger than the ones that would come later. But we mentioned earlier Ents' strength. And I've said before that, like, in other episodes, trolls are a pale imitation of Ents, and that goes for their strength as well. So you think of how strong a troll is. Ents, they ain't got shit on that. Trolls are strong, but Ents have the destructive power of trees over hundreds of years in a few seconds. And we think now about, like, so we own our house, right? And when you own your house, you have to get certain checks done on the property and stuff like that. And there's still plants in the UK and like roots and stuff that you've got to watch out for, because they will fuck your house right up.
Yeah,
and
they'll get into the foundations.
Yeah, and it's that, like...
It's also like the power of nature, like, you know, when you see tsunamis and hurricanes and stuff like that, like, they are the forces of nature.
Yeah, they are.
Stronger than any man.
Yeah, straight up. So in the Two Towers, Merry...
So Putin, watch yourself.
Yeah, Lieutenant Ents. No, Merry in the Two Towers describes Treebeard. So Merry and Treebeard are talking. Merry's telling all this to Aragorn and that when they come later, but he said, me and Treebeard were talking. And while they're talking, they're at Isengard, and Treebeard starts just casually pulling apart a stone wall, but it's described as if he's casually pulling a bread crust apart. And that when Ents grab hold of something, their roots like freeze to it, and they can just start pulling it apart. So imagine something so strong that it just starts pulling apart a stone wall like a bread crust, which is just like, fuck me. In the Third Age, we only hear about the Ents in Fanghorn, which is huge. And I've mentioned in other episodes that Fanghorn, which you can see on our map here, is it's like a couple of 100 miles dimensions wise, right? However, Eriador, which can you see? So you see the Misty Mountains here on the right hand side. I'm showing Becca a map of Middle Earth that I've got on the wall. So if you've got your own, have a look. But you've got the Misty Mountains, and then you've got the Blue Mountains on the left hand side. All that between, pretty much where it says Eriador, that used to be forests. So Elrond says there used to be a time where a squirrel could go from the sea to, I don't know, like the Misty Mountains and never touch the ground. So it used to be, so that's where the Ents... Well, it was the whole west of the West Country, Middle Earth. It used to be a big forest, and that's not even including and that's where the Ents lived. But that's not even including the Ents who made their way into Beleriand, which obviously would be further west, but it's a bit wet at the moment. So they used to be quite widespread, And we've only talked about the Ents so far, but there also was Entwives. And the Ents tended to the trees and the forests. And the Entwives, they like to grow and control small gardens and vegetables. And that was their jam. So that's why they worship Yavanna. And I don't know if you remember, I think it was like our first or second episode, I was telling you all the things that Aule is responsible for. But Yavanna, his wife, is also, even though tools are needed to farm and stuff, she's the one who's responsible for that, her and Aule together, because that's a marrying of their... It's like tools and nature, is farming and agriculture. And this is where we get into the sad part of the story. Yeah, well, you haven't heard it yet, but it is quite sad. Like, we discussed it on our Two Towers episode, but we'll go more in depth here. At some point in the First or Second Age, the Entwives began to move away from the forests so that they could tend their gardens. They'd travel far and wide, and I'm going back to our map again, but eventually they'd start moving east, and they passed over the Anduin River, and eventually, and you can see here where I'm pointing, they made it to a place called the Brownlands, and there they would teach men agriculture, and men honoured them. So we were taught to farm by Entwives properly, like they would teach proper agriculture. But sadly, during the Second Age, both Sauron and the Númenóreans, the Kingdom of Man on the island, they'd not sunk yet, cut down many of the dense forests across all of Middle-earth. And Fangorn is what remains of that. That's what remains of the Great Forest is. But Sauron, being the cunt that he is, also destroyed the gardens of the Entwives during his war. And that's the last that they were really heard from. And in all likeliness, the Entwives were killed by Sauron. That's a whole race of people. It's just, so there's a concept in literature which you might be aware of called like the long defeat. And I think that's an example of it. Like, no matter how well the War of the Ring went for the Ents, it was still, you know, unless Dagor-Dagorath is real and at the end of all things it'll be remade, it is the long defeat for the Ents. And so the Ents used to go out looking for the Entwives, but because they're so long-lived, it took them ages to notice. Like, it's about 7,000 years between the First Age and the Third Age. And the Ents would go out. As time went on, they'd go out less and less and go less far each time, and they were so absorbed with tending the trees that's why they missed the Entwives going in the first place. They were so absorbed in their work. And I was saying earlier that Ents become more tree-ish as they get older.
Yeah.
So there's some Ents who they don't take part in the sack of Isengard because they're so tree-ish. Like, they spend all year round just in the groves of trees with their eyes closed, and that
sounds idyllic.
Yeah. But when the Ents would go out, they'd go far and wide calling for the Entwives. And as I mentioned, by the time we meet them in the Third Age, they're dwindling to extinction. And that's why when they rouse themselves for war, it is the last march of the Ents, because there's no more of them. They can't make more. Quickbeam is one of the younger ones, and he's regarded as hasty. And the reason he got his name, Quickbeam, is because they were at an Entmoot where they were all talking. So like an Entmoot is meeting events, and Quickbeam agreed with the objective of the Entmoot before one of them had finished saying good morning. So ever since then, like it's like when you do something daft in like a workplace and you get a nickname that sticks with you.
Yeah.
So that's where Quickbeam got his one from. But when the Ents rouse themselves and march to war, and they do a great job of it. They fuck up Isengard. They flood it with the River Isen and the trees. So they guard the trees, and some trees are just trees, but some trees are called Huorns, and Huorns are sentient trees. And they nearly kill the hobbits when they are travelling through the old forest, which is at the beginning of their journey.
Is that when they get like sucked in by the roots?
Yeah. So that happens to Merry and Pippin in the films, but in the books, there's the old forest with the Huorns, and these Huorns that the Ents tend to also make sure that not a single orc escapes the Battle of Helm's Deep. So at Helm's Deep, in the extended edition, I think they are there, but in the books for sure, the orcs run when Erkenbrand and Gandalf like turn up and start fucking in the films it's Éomer who turns up, but in the books it's Erkenbrand, and they turn up, they win the Battle of Helm's Deep, and the orcs start to flee, but a forest has appeared behind them.
Yeah.
And do you remember me saying
the
like
mound.
Yeah, the death mound. Not a single orc escapes Helm's Deep because of the Huorns, who are guarded by the Ents.
Yeah.
And once their job's finished, they go back to Fangorn, and they leave behind earth that looks like it's been like tilled and stuff like that. The mound of bodies that they leave behind, which is a hill that no man ever steps on. Not much is known about the Ents after the War of the Ring, except when Aragorn becomes King Elessar, he allows the Ents to be completely self-governing in the same way that he does with the hobbits, and they have their own lands. And in all likeliness, they would dwindle away because there's no more Entings. And Galadriel says to Treebeard when they part in the books. So in the books, Treebeard, they all go after the War of the Ring, like they travel together for a bit, and Treebeard meets Galadriel. And when they part, she says she hopes to see him again when Beleriand is lifted from the sea in spring. So I've alluded to it quite a few times throughout our episodes, but there is a concept of Ragnarok in Middle-earth, like it's Dagor Dagarath, where everybody will come together, Morgoth will come back for one last hurrah, and at the end of that, Eru will remake the universe and Aule will remake the world with the help of the dwarves. Tolkien couldn't ever decide whether Dagor Dagarath was real or not, but I like to think it is, because that would be quite fitting, because you'd have all the great leaders back together, like like Feanor would finally be released, and it said that Feanor at the end of all things would break open the Silmarils and restore the light of the trees, for example, so the world would be remade and perfect again. And so that's what Galadriel's saying, is that Beleriand will be lifted out of the sea and everything will go back to being okay. And I like to think that for the Ents, that would be obviously the best ending, because they'd see the Entwives again. And in the books, Treebeard makes sure when the hobbits are leaving, he says, like, make sure you keep a lookout for the Entwives, and if you see them, tell me. And it's fucking heartbreaking. It's just, if you think, it's just old men who've lost their wives and they can't come to terms with it, and there's no hope for the future of them, and it's such a sad story. But yeah, that's the main chunk of the information on the Ents. Do you feel like you've learned a bit more about them?
Yeah, I feel like my perspective has changed a little on them losing their wives.
Yeah, because I know when you've discussed it before, you made quite a few jokes about it. But for me, it's always been like I'm feeling really sad now just talking about it. To be honest, I know we make jokes and that, but it's that
you're so busy working that you don't even realise I've gone to the shops.
Yeah.
Come back, put the shopping away.
Yeah. Last time
to bed.
Yeah, last time we talked about this, you said this is like you not noticing I've gone until the toilet roll runs out. Which I found...
It's true though, isn't it?
I found it vexing and churlish.
Oh. It's true though.
No, it's not. But yeah, do you have a bit more perspective?
Yeah, I feel a bit more sorry for the Ents.
Yeah. Oh.
I still feel like girl power though, and I've got to stick up for the Entwives. They should have realised they'd gone. Yeah. However slow you travel.
They are what are they, like the oldest race surviving, and this week's fun fact is kind of linked into this actually. But the old, they are old, but they don't have anywhere to go to renew their vitality like Valinor. And
as well, the Entwives didn't become so tree-like that they didn't have aspirations. Like they went off and they taught humans how to like agricultural skills. But whereas the trees, their excuse is the Ents' excuse is that they've become so tree-like that they're just so tree-like, they're just chilling in the trees. It's just not a good enough excuse. I'm sorry.
Right, that's a woman's perspective on the Ents and Entwives. Fair enough. Aye, would you care for this week's fun fact? It's in universe this week.
Go on then.
So, you know that when elves die, they go to the halls of Mandos.
Yeah.
And they abide there for a time, and eventually they get a new body and they are reincarnated.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever wondered what happened if they tried to not go there? Because I can tell you what will happen. There's a concept in Tolkien of Hroa, which is a body, and the Fea, which is your spirit. Elves have such a strong spirit, their Fea is so strong, that if they were to stay in Middle-earth and never leave for Valinor, where they could live forever, and never leave to dwell in a man in the West, eventually their body would be consumed by their spirit to the point that they would just be invisible spectres that are unable to communicate with the world. So if elves stay in Middle-earth long enough, their bodies would be consumed and they would just become ghosts.
Interesting.
Yeah, crazy. Like, I had no idea until I read about that, but I think it's in the nature of Middle-earth. I read it a few weeks ago and I've been
Where did the body go?
The body would just be consumed, like burnt away, like they'd fade. So do you know, like Well, yeah, I imagine
Do you think like the atoms would disassemble?
I don't know about physically, but it makes me think of... do you know at the end of Back to the Future when Marty McFly starts to disappear? It just makes me think like that. Like, they'd start to fade and become more and more see-through.
I'm thinking of Mike TV in
Oh,
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where he's like, he's floating above your head in about 1 million pieces.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what would happen physically to their bodies, but their spirit would consume it. So I'd imagine it's described as like burning. So maybe it'd consume it like fire on paper, like burning up parchment. But yeah, that's why elves need to leave. And you know, it's not just like how weary they get as well. There's a real possibility that if they don't leave, eventually their bodies
completely disappear.
Yeah, exactly. Aye, but yeah, that's it for this week. I thought this was going to be a longer episode, but I'm pleasantly surprised it's about the same time as normal. But yeah, do you feel like you've learned a lot this week?
Yeah.
I'm pleased that you seem to appreciate the perspective of how sad of a story the Ents are.
I am growing in empathy.
Yeah.
I am an empath. I am.
Me, an empath.
At the core.
Yeah, I miss all those memes of like, you know, it's like someone like are really angry for an obvious reason. It's like me, an empath, understanding why. So in terms of schedule, next week, as normal, Monday the 8th, normal episode, Wednesday the 10th, Drunk Watch episode. The following Monday, there won't be an episode, but the following Wednesday will be Drunk Watch as normal, and then regular scheduled listening as promised. But the next episode we're doing is all about eagles. I've got my research prepped and ready to go. They're just absolute massive winged assholes, but we'll see if I can change my mind on that one. So I'm going to leave you with a goodbye from me.
And goodbye from Rebecca.
Okay, and have a good day wherever you are.